The cranial nerve number 8, nervus vestibulocochlearis. It has two parts. Pars cochlearis, responsible for the hearing, and pars vestibularis, responsible for the balance. We'll start with the first part, pars cochlearis. And in this part, everything starts from the inner ear structure, the cochlea. In the cochlea, as you know, we have the receptor cells in the corti organs, and the dendrites from the corti organs, the dendrites of the first neuron, transmit impulses toward the bodies of the first neurons that are arranged in the central part of the cochlea and that follow generally the shape of the cochlea. So that is reflected in the name of that ganglion, the ganglion spirale. The axons from the ganglion spirale forms the pars cochlearis, nervi vestibulocochlearis. Within the meatus acousticus internus, both parts fuse together and forms the common nervus vestibulocochlearis. Here you see the nervus vestibulocochlearis, which escapes from the meatus acousticus internus through the porus acousticus internus and finally enters the subarachnoidal space, the cisterna pontis. After crossing the cisterna pontis, nervus vestibulocochlearis finally reach the brainstem, and here you see that that nerve, it is on the pontocerebellar angle on the lateral part of the sulcus bulbopontinus. So the fibers of the cochlear part of the vestibulocochlear nerve finally reach the central nervous system. Within the brainstem, the fibers of the cochlear part of the vestibulocochlear nerve synapses with the cochlear nuclei. The projection of this nuclei is close to the lateral angle of the fossa rhomboidea. So both of them, nucleus cochlearis, ventralis and dorsalis, are localized here, and fibers from the nucleus cochlearis ventralis or anterior mainly cross the midline and forms corpus trapezoideum. After crossing the midline, the fibers from the anterior cochlear nucleus switch to the opposite side, superior olivary complex. A small amount, a fraction of the fibers from the ventral cochlear nucleus do not cross the midline and makes the synapses with ipsilateral superior olivary complex nuclei. From the superior olivary complex nuclei and from the nucleus cochlearis dorsalis, there are ascending fibers, the so-called lemniscus lateralis, which ascends just under the surface of the trigonum lemnisci and reach the colliculus inferior level. At that level, this lemniscus lateralis synapses with the next neurons, and the axons of this neurons from the nucleus colliculi inferioris passes through the brachium colliculi inferioris to the direction of the thalamic nucleus, the corpus geniculatum mediale. Finally, fibers from the corpus geniculatum mediale pass through the capsula interna within the brain and reach the cortical auditory center, the Brodmann area 41, 42, the cortex, the area in the deep of the sulcus lateralis, the gyri temporalis transversi. They are localized on the temporal lobe here deep in the sulcus lateralis. There is alternative pathway from the colliculus inferior to the stratum griseum colliculis superioris, and from here, as you know, there is the beginning of the tractus tectospinalis, which crosses the midline at the same level in the mesencephalon and then descends contralaterally to the motor neurons of the ventral horn in the medulla spinalis. Pars vestibularis, nervi vestibulocochlearis, or vestibular part, also starts from the structures of the inner ear, from the canales semicircularis, utriculus et sacculus. In these parts of inner ear, we have the receptors that analyze and detects the static position of the head and the acceleration of the head. Receptors responsible for the detecting of the acceleration of the head are in the dilatations of are localized within the dilatations of semicircular canals, the ampulla, so-called. Here inside we have crista ampullaris with the receptor cells. In its turn, the receptors that analyze the static position of the head are within the so-called macula of the utricula, macula utriculi, and the macula sacculi, so approximately a bit closer to the cochlea. Dendrites from all these receptors approach each other, and here in between the cochlea and the semicircular canals, utriculus sacculus, we have the ganglia, vestibular ganglia. Accents from the vestibular ganglia forms the pars vestibularis, nervi vestibulocochlearis, which within the canal meatus acousticus internus join the pars cochlearis. After passing through the meatus acousticus internus and porus acousticus internus, pars vestibularis, just like the pars cochlearis, finally reach the brainstem and synapses with the vestibular nuclei. The projection of the vestibular nuclei corresponds to the lateral portion of the fossa rhomboidea and the level where we have so-called area vestibularis. The next order pathways from the vestibular nuclei includes the connection of this nuclei with the motor nuclei of the spinal cord, tractus vestibulospinalis, connection of the vestibular nuclei with the olivary, inferior olivary nucleus, tractus vestibulo-olivaris, connection of vestibular nuclei with the cerebellum, tractus vestibulo-cerebellaris, and of course the connection with the cortex through the VPL nucleus of the thalamus and thalamocortical fibers for the somatosensory center. Also, the nuclei vestibularis communicates with other cranial nerve nuclei via the fasciculus longitudinalis medialis.